welcome back to another episode of the Authors Unite show. Today we have Dr. James Richardson with us. So welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, Tyler.
Of course, grateful to have you here. So if you can start us off, just tell us a little bit more about you and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm a cultural anthropologist turned business strategist. I work with fast growing early stage consumer brands now, and I try to help them tap into the most powerful human behavior possible so they can accelerate their growth.
Okay. I'm curious, how did you realize that genius or what got you started in doing that?
Uh, in working with founders, you mean?
Yeah, or I guess basically what you said, I haven't heard it worded that way before. So I guess what did you do prior to helping? I'm assuming this is something I guess you did for your own company and then you started to help others with it.
So my journey is a little weird because I was on the academic track
Okay.
until about 2003, and then I jumped off the train.
Okay. Yeah, I dropped out of college, so I like it.
I did get my degree. I closed on the degree, but I didn't want to stay in academia. So I went into market research, and I happened to join a company in Seattle that was a specialist in emerging health and wellness trends, which a lot of them are mainstream now, but back then in 2003, they were pretty weird. And my first client was Whole Foods when it
Oh,
was
awesome.
when it was a third the size it is now. So I'm culture anthropologists are, uh, we are actually notorious, I think, in academia for studying weird stuff.
I like that though. That sounds cool.
And that started with tribal studies, right, in the early 20th century with Margaret Mead and all these folks some of whom are actually famous. But so and I sort of come from that cloth, I guess. So
Okay.
I studied my own version of a marginalized community in southern India for my graduate work. But anyways, so when I left academia, I wanted to do something that would use my brain.
Yeah.
And I was attracted to this company because they were studying weird, our version of weird at the time, which was natural organic foods. So,
Yeah.
which I didn't even eat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really didn't. To me, Whole Foods was a place you got pretty flowers when you were going, for a date or something.
Yeah.
Back then, so
Yeah.
I had no interest in the food there.
Yeah.
So what happened is that over about 15 years at that company, I developed some specialization in early stage brands and how they were in a particularly elite group of them that I wrote my book about. And some of them are now famous, like Kind Bar and Skinny Pop. And
Oh yeah. Kind bar for sure. Yeah, I eat that.
the the leading coconut water brand, Vita Coco.
Yeah.
And there's many, many others. There's about 100 of them in this little group. So follow the train of thought here. So, the guy who studies weird, joins a market research firm to study weird behavior that's growing. And then we have to explain it to our big clients. And then what happened is on the way, I developed through some studies we did for big companies, an expertise in a subset of weird. So the weird within the weird. And that's the exponentially growing brands like Kind Bar that came out of nowhere, surprised everybody. And they did it through non-traditional marketing techniques and non-traditional product design in the industry as well. That was a big part of it. So that case study set ended up inspiring me to quit. I had other reasons to quit, but that really it gave me the confidence to leave my executive position at this firm and go out and help founders directly. And so I spent a few years screwing around with that to learn more about where in the early stage universe I could be of use. When I figured that out, I wrote the book.
Got it.
And here I am. So the book is about ramping your brand, is about the best practices that I learned mathematically isolating brands like Kind Bar that went from a $0 to $100 million in 7 to 10 years or less. And that That's actually really slow from the standard of Wall Street, but it's actually insanely fast by the standards of the average early stage company, which doesn't have money and doesn't have an ability to raise it either, or they just don't have very ambitious founders. So it's like the top 10% of the early stage brands you see at a place like Whole Foods when you walk around their aisles.
Yeah.
In those aisles, 10% of those brands, are growing exponentially. They're doubling or more every year. And those are going to be the next kind bar. 90% of what you're seeing there is just, it'll either be gone out of business or just replaced within a couple of years.
Where's Kind Bar at now? Because I would imagine it's way over 100 million now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a $1 billion business now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, because they're like, I eat them occasionally, but they're pretty much in every grocery store, at least for where I live. They're everywhere. So I was like, I think just in Miami alone, they're at least doing 10 million. I don't know.
They're in a healthy chunk of vending machines. So
Yeah.
That's the final. I mean, if you want to understand whether a trend, whether something is true, totally mainstream, I always point to gas stations, but much better metric is vending machines. Like,
yeah, they're in gas stations. But yeah, you're right. If they make it to the vending machine, that's even like deeper.
Frito-Lay controls like half the vending machine snack sales in the US. So
interesting.
There's not a lot of room left. So you have to make a big case to that cranky vending guy that you should get a slot.
Let's use Kind as the example. Like, can you walk us through, I know you touch on this in your book, but can you walk us through like the marketing techniques they use? Like, and I'm just curious from a branding standpoint, like the name Kind, I'm assuming obviously the name I think was part of the strategy. So can you walk us through how they did that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Dan, I know, has talked publicly, and I have not worked with him, just to be clear.
Yeah.
But off the public record, it was very clear that he had an ulterior motive building the business because he has a philanthropy he wants to fund.
Okay.
And that was part of his inspiration. I wouldn't say Dan, he's not like Cliff Bar's founder, Gary Erickson, who like was literally an amateur athlete. And so he developed the product for his mountain bike rides. End of story. So it's not, Dan is not, he didn't develop this because he had a particular passion in the category that I'm aware of. He did a much more analytical approach to building this thing. And I think it actually kind of helped him because he didn't over design it.
Yeah.
He didn't, I called it, for years, I called it, trail mix as a rectangle, right? It's like trail mix, but you don't have to get your hands dirty and you have to dig your hand into a bag because that's all it is. I mean, there's really nothing in it in any of their bars that wasn't already in a trail mix bag somewhere. So the proposition's super easy, very few. There's no reason not to try Kind Bar once you know about it. And that was their big advantage. Was that they had like a 98% conversion rate. When they sampled it at events out of the store, 98% of those people would go out and buy one when they measured it, at least once.
Yeah.
And a substantial percentage become heavy repeat buyers. So he had a very simple design. It was in a world at that time when nutrition bars were really like these processed slabs.
Yeah.
Like Cliff Bar, and they call them slab bars. And they're just endless list of ingredients. Now, Cliff's ingredient list was quote unquote all natural, but I mean, it was full of weirdness, fractionated soy particles and all sorts of bizarres. Whereas, Kind was almost like 20 years ahead of its time. It was just trail mix. It was like real food, right? What he figured out was clever. He figured out an R&D process that no one had figured out. So that actually was the secret, was actually literally the factory R&D to produce these things, because it's not easy at all to take trail mix and glue it into a rectangle. It sounds really easy.
Yeah, right.
But no. And I have a feeling it had been shot down already in the big food industry for production level reasons. Like, well, we'd have to retool our whole factory. We're not doing that. Next concept. But the brand name is, I mean, people look back on the brand name as really powerful. I think what's powerful about it is it's just simple. It was one syllable. Everyone knows the word. When you take common words like that are sort of generic but positive, they end up becoming what I call like these empty vessels of meaning. So
Mhm.
even though kind has very strong denotations and even connotations of philanthropy in American society, if you put it on a package, it's almost going to be like a blank slate of sort of generic positivity. And that was really smart because he can then fill it with these other meanings of the user experience. And that's what I tell people to do. If you're going to overthink your trademark, just make it simple, make it not have a too much powerful meaning and certainly no loaded meaning.
Mm.
Um, and I think it's kind of hard, even though kind you could argue is moralistic, it really isn't. I mean, who the hell's going to oppose it? No, I don't want kindness. So, I mean, even the most irascible Grinch is going to say yes to kind, at least
No,
when
100%.
asked, right, in public. So they may actually be a jerk, but they'll still vote for kind. So it was kind of a no-brainer. Easy to share the name. That helps people when they're building a business that doesn't have even has what we call spotty distribution. Like it's at one grocery chain, not the other in town. You know, and
Yeah.
this is how all these businesses start. So you need a name brand, you need a trademark name that's going to be easy for people to repeat.
Mhm.
So if you go to like Expo West, when it starts up again, you'll see all these brands, and some of them literally have names that are like phrases.
Mhm.
And those are, I swear, Tyler, those are the ones that are the most moralistic and annoying. You know,
Mhm.
um, the better choice. It'd be things like that.
Yeah.
It's just like in your face. They're not. They're complicated. They're not easy to remember. They're generic. Whereas I think he had a combination of a pack design and a product that was sort of, wow, someone should have done this before,
Mhm.
right? Um, but to your earlier question, what he did, what was genius, he and his team, and it wasn't even, these were not ideas that he came up with. And that's, I mean, you know, he's very much an open-minded leader. He will follow what's working. He's not dogmatic, right? And
Yeah.
that's really important when you're starting off doing something innovative because you don't really know till you get it out there and start selling it what the market's going to teach you that you then need to incorporate back into your operations. And that's what I work with clients on. That's what I wrote the book on was, you know, get out there and iterate, learn in the first couple of years. Don't just hit the gas, you know, figure out your playbook that's going to get you a whole bunch of rabid fans that are buying cases and cases of your product. So what did Kind do? Well, they found out early on that yoga teachers in the big cities had discovered Kind at Whole Foods, and they were already advocating for it to their membership. And at that time, it was middle-aged baby boomer females.
Mhm.
Um, they were signing up for yoga in droves. They were really into weight management um, at a critical point in their lives. So here was this low-calorie snack full of protein, and it didn't have a lot of sugar. It had like 5 grams of sugar in it. But the weird thing is, it tastes like a candy bar. Like it's got
Yeah.
just enough chocolate on the bottom. It doesn't bring a lot of sugar, but it brings a lot of sweetness. And so you got this candy bar slash snack thing that's like a distraction, and it allows you to like coast towards a meal and avoid other snacks. So it was perfectly timed
Yeah.
in American history with this group of women who was big group of women. Were educated, they were going to yoga. And so what happened was that they caught on that these were some early unpaid advocates. And you know what they did? They hired them.
Mm.
So they started going all over the country and they hired yoga teachers to be part-time paid ambassadors. So who was staffing their event? Their event tables at marathons and all these other places where Kind slowly started to show up. It was a bunch of yoga teachers.
Mm.
Not exclusively, but heavily. So because this was a workforce back in the mid 2000s, in the mid aughts, that was one of the first workforces of baby boomer women who had like quit corporate America and like, screw this, my husband makes enough money. Screw this, I'm not doing this anymore. I love yoga. I'm going to teach yoga, and then I'll find other sources of income, right? So they were already ready. They're like gig workers at the time, before Uber, before any of this. So they're
Wow.
like they're super well educated, well spoken gig workers. So, you know, they're actually pretty good at verbal persuasion, right? So they would hawk it to their studios, to their students, and then they would get paid to run the Kind booth. And the beauty was that they had come to Kind before and they already loved it. So you were just paying them to channel the passion, not fake it.
Yes. Yeah.
They're not actors. They're just fans who didn't want their time to be undervalued. So it's a really brilliant strategy, and it still works today. But the challenge is you have to have systems in place to meet your fans and give a crap. If you don't, you go down this weird, well, the problem is social media. So what happened was Instagram took over about 6 to 8 years ago. It took over the brand ambassador role from this field marketing out of store event. And a lot of companies in the early stage, they just feel like it's easier to go to an influencer agency and get a whole bunch of models on Instagram to talk up their brand, except that there's no evidence it works systematically, but there's systematic evidence that if you show up at a table at an event, which is relevant to like Kind Bar or your brand, and then you hand free samples, X percentage will convert in retail and buy your product within days.
Yeah. Interesting.
So that's a proven model, but then everyone got distracted by Instagram influencing. Why? Because with a credit card, I can start that today. It's this impatience, Tyler, whereas Dan wasn't building a business for the long term to fund a philanthropic foundation. And, I've talked about it in the press before. It's sort of like the patient guys who are disciplined always win this game. And they win huge.
Yeah. I think in every game almost.
Yeah. I mean, that's true with Apple Computer. I mean, Apple Computer was a joke for most of the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
I remember throwing my Apple laptop in the trash in 1993 because it was a piece of crap.
I was 2 years old.
I was so disgusted with the brand. I was like, I'm done.
They've come a long way. Now, are you using an Apple product right now?
Yeah, I'm using an.
I am. Well, let's do this. Tell us where the people can get the book and your website and everything, so people know. And then in the future, maybe what we can do is schedule a longer time to really dive in. But I think this was a good kind of introduction. And we covered Kind, and then obviously your book is going to cover way more in detail of how to do this. So I'll let you.
Yeah. Well, I would encourage people to go to Amazon.com, type Ramping Your Brand right in there, and it's very well indexed. So you can go there if you want to buy a copy right now. The day this airs, it'll be on sale on my discount for about $9.99 paperback and $4.99 Kindle. And if you're interested in what I do, go to premiumgrowthsolutions.com, and you can learn about my client base and all the crazy things I do.
Perfect, man. Thank you for coming on the show.
All right. Thank you very much, Tyler.